Hello, welcome to Paradigm Shift. I'm Charles Jacobs. By now, most Jews in America know that there is a serious problem on American campuses for Jewish students, especially those who care about Israel. They've heard about anti-Israel professors. They've heard about student groups hostile to Jewish students who support Israel. They've heard about BDS, the movement to boycott, divest from, and sanction Israel, and about Apartheid Week, now a normalized event on many campuses. They've heard how pro-Israel speakers are interrupted or even blocked from speaking on campus. They might even have heard about physical assaults. Many Jews would assume that there are adults on campus that students could go to for support. Surely, right at their own universities, there must be Jewish professors who'd help them and who'd also stick up for Israel. But sadly, as Alan Dershowitz has complained for over 2 decades, the vast majority of Jewish professors keep their heads down and would rather avoid conflict than respond as they should. Today we have an exception to that rule. Tammi Rossman-Benjamin comes to us from the belly of the beast, the University of California, surely one of the most radical American campuses. 20 years ago, when she saw what was happening on her campus, she did not run and hide. She stood and fought and has never relented. Instead, she has built a movement to help defend Jewish students on campus. Indeed, she has become, to those of us who've been in this fight over the years, a revered and heroic figure. Tammi is founder and director of the AMCHA Initiative. She was a faculty member in Hebrew and Jewish Studies at the University of California from 1996 to 2016. She's published articles and reports about academic anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. She's lectured widely on the growing threat to the safety of Jewish students on college campuses. Her research has been featured on several volumes on anti-Semitism. She's presented her findings at such prestigious universities as Harvard, McGill, and the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. In 2016, she led a coalition of nearly 50 Jewish and educational advocacy groups that successfully lobbied the University of California, the nation's largest and most prestigious public university, to condemn, quote, anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic forms of anti-Zionism, unquote. The University of California is the first U.S. university to adopt this landmark intolerance policy to protect Jewish students. Honored more times than we have time to mention, Tammi Rossman-Benjamin was named one of the top 100 people influencing Jewish life in 2014 by the Allgemeiner. She was named one of 2013's bright pro-Israel lights on U.S. campuses by the Jewish Press, and she was nominated for Jewish Heroine of the Year, you see, I told you, by the Jewish Federation of North America in 2011. Tammi, welcome to Paradigm Shift.
It's great to be here, Charles.
Tammi, tell us how you got involved in defending Jewish students.
Well, teaching Hebrew, as I did, and Jewish studies, I had a lot of Jewish students, and they would come to my classes, and they would come to my office hours, and they would complain to me, sometimes even cry to me, about what they were experiencing as Jewish students, primarily as a result of their feelings for Israel. I mean, they felt that they were being discriminated against and sometimes harassed, treated unfairly by not only their peers, but also by their professors. And, you know, I felt at the time, and I feel, you know, even stronger about it at this point in time, that these students need someone who will stand up for them and someone who will defend them. And as you pointed out, there aren't many faculty members who are willing to stand up for them. And since one of the problems that we're finding now, as then, is that university administrators often treat Jewish students unfairly and are insensitive for a variety of reasons to Jewish student concerns, or equally as sensitive to them, or as they're more insensitive to them than they are to the concerns of some other student groups, that Jewish students didn't know where to turn. And so at that point, I felt a responsibility to actually stand up on their behalf whenever I could. And that was really the genesis of the idea to start an organization that would stand up, that would have the backs of Jewish students, so that they could be pro-Israel or not be pro-Israel, but they could be Jewish students and feel that they could freely express themselves on our campus. And then it became a national organization. We wanted to actually stand up and protect and defend Jewish students on campuses across the country.
So is there a risk to do this? Is there a cost for Jewish professors to stand up? Did you suffer any backlash for this?
There's a tremendous cost. There's a tremendous cost for standing up. It's a politically incorrect thing to do at this point in time. I mean, with the anti-Israel sentiment on most college campuses, or I should say on many college campuses, particularly the campuses that are most populated with Jewish students, or that have the largest populations of Jewish students, have very strong anti-Zionist tendencies, not only among the student body, student groups, et cetera, but also, and maybe even more importantly, among the faculty, particularly in the humanities and social sciences. So, you know.
So give us an example of what might happen on campus, and an example of what happens to somebody like yourself, who's a Jewish professor, who's backed a Jewish student.
Well, let me give you an example, and I'll make it a personal example, what happened to me when I actually stood up for Jewish students on my campus, and I did it in a very public way and in a very legal way. What I did was I filed a federal complaint on behalf, a civil rights complaint on behalf of Jewish students at my university that I felt were being discriminated against and harassed because of actually where the harassment was actually coming from faculty.
So what actually happened to the students? What did the faculty do to harass them?
Well, it had to do with the bringing in, I would say it had actually to do with departmental and university sponsorship of different events, particularly events, but we were also talking about classroom activities. But the central complaint had to do with an event that was sponsored by one of the residential colleges and some departments that was virulently anti-Israel, but to the point of being anti-Semitic. And the students, many of the students got together and they actually wrote a petition. They petitioned their college and their administrators, and they asked not for the event to be canceled, because they recognized that the student group that was also sponsoring this, I guess it was something like the Students for Justice in Palestine, had a right to put on such an event that was virulently anti-Israel. But the fact that their residential college was behind this, and that the university as an institution was behind such virulently anti-Israel and anti-Semitic event, was extremely hurtful to the Jewish students.
So what did you do?
Well, so I filed a complaint, and it wasn't just that event. That event was, as it were, the tip of the iceberg, and we brought up, it was quite a long complaint that was actually open for investigation. For a year and a half, it was open for investigation by the federal government, by the Department of Education. And that made not only the cause, but it made me a very prominent figure as being somebody who was really challenging the anti-Zionists on campus. Not just the faculty, the students took on this issue, even though it wasn't directed against, the complaint was not directed against students, did not talk about students, it talked about faculty and university administration. The students decided that this was a perfect opportunity for them to actually target a figure who was, oppositional to them, who was one of their adversaries, and to try to take them down. And so they went on.
When you say target, so you became a target of the anti-Zionists on the campus, and so what did that mean?
They went on a very well orchestrated and complex campaign of defamation and harassment of me, and in a very, very personal way. So they posted, for one thing, they found a videotape of me that was online of a speech that I had given in the Boston area about a year before that to a synagogue group, talking about the challenges for Jewish students on college campuses. And I mentioned some of the the Muslim Student Association, the Students for Justice in Palestine, and I talked about how these groups really intimidated Jewish students and some of their activities and some of their ties and connections to other organizations that themselves had ties to terrorist organizations. So they found a little clip of me talking about these groups, and those groups, the Students for Justice in Palestine in particular, the head of that group on my campus was a film major and took a little clip and turned it into a major campaign to actually defame me. And so she took that clip and she put it up with a petition, and she got several thousand signatures from around the world of people who actually called for my condemnation by, or called for the university to condemn me, the university president at the time. They plastered my campus with flyers saying that I was a racist and an Islamophobe. They had 4 campuses of the University of California, Berkeley, Davis, Irvine, and I think Santa Barbara, that actually their student governments voted on resolutions to condemn Hebrew professor Tammi Rossman-Benjamin for being a racist and an Islamophobe. So it was really a campaign of, I would say, defamation and harassment. But what they were trying to do, I mean, even though it was a very personal campaign and it affected me and affected my ability to do my job, to teach, it was clear to me what they were trying to do, which was to make an example of me, and to make it so that nobody would want to stand up and on behalf of Jewish students in order to not face what Tammi Rossman-Benjamin had to face to stand up on their behalf. And they were very successful.
How were they successful? They were successful.
Well, I think that they were successful. I think at that point, this was a few years ago, but at that point, a lot of Jewish organizations pulled away from our organization and pulled away from me personally, because you become sort of toxic, because you get painted. I mean, one of the worst things that you can call somebody nowadays is a racist, is an Islamophobe, and it makes you toxic. It's like calling somebody a sexual harasser. It makes them, even if it's not true, and in this case it wasn't true. I'm neither racist nor Islamophobic, but I was certainly painted that way. And you tell a lie long enough, and it becomes, everybody accepts it.
So this is the climate and the environment that you and Jewish students live in on the University of California campuses. So what is AMCHA?
AMCHA is an organization. We founded, we used a Hebrew word, often much mispronounced because of the way it's spelled, but it's actually a Hebrew word that means your people. But it also connotes, in sort of popular discourse, it also connotes sort of grassroots and the everyman. And what we began to feel was that Jewish organizations, at the time that we started, this was in 2010, even before, a little before that, I mean, to actually think about AMCHA and think about an organization that would protect Jewish students and fight campus anti-Semitism, there really wasn't much of a focus in the organizational Jewish world on campus anti-Semitism. There was a focus on anti-Israelism. There was a focus on fighting, defending Israel on campus, and there were many groups, or not many, but there were some very fine groups, and there continue to be fine groups that actually make Israel's case on campus and help students to make Israel's case on campus. But there were very few groups, I would say no groups, that were actually defending students that could then go on and do whatever they wanted to do, including make Israel's case on campus. And so we felt that there was a need in the Jewish world to not only defend students, but to raise awareness within the Jewish community that these students were really uniquely vulnerable because as a Jew, and being connected, even if they weren't pro-Israel, but especially if they were pro-Israel, that they were very vulnerable to the kinds of things that I later experienced in a very personal way, which is that you get targeted for delegitimization and defamation because anti-Zionism, which is what is fueling, I would say, the lion's share of anti-Semitism. I would say it's not the only form of anti-Semitism, but it is really mostly fueled by anti-Zionist sentiment. Anti-Zionism is the desire to essentially effectively neutralize or shut down any expression of Zionism in the world in terms of Israel, but also on college campuses. So it leads to the attempt to shut down the expression of Jewish and pro-Israel students.
So there are people in the Jewish world who say that people like yourself and me are exaggerating, that this is America, there's a few cases of this, but it's really not, it's not the case that it's actually anti-Semitic. It's more criticism of Israeli policy, etc. Now, you've done extensive research. AMCHA has done extensive research on this. And what findings can you point to that that make your case that this is really a serious issue?
Right. It's a good, I mean, the issue that you're raising about the relationship between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism is a good issue. It's a hot issue. It's a hot topic. You know, we can discuss and debate, is anti-Zionism, is anti-Semitism. I know you and I won't have any debate about that. We both agree that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism at its core, that the desire to destroy and eliminate the Jewish state is obviously to us, and I think I would say to the vast majority of the Jewish world, anti-Semitic. If you want to get rid of the Jewish state and only the Jewish state, that is anti-Semitism. But
there is no BDS for Sudan or for China.
Right.
Or
I mean, the double standard is breathtaking. And we could, again, we could talk about, let's say, the State Department definition, which says, which gives a kind of a definition or a guideline for when certain kinds of anti-Israel expression move into the realm of anti-Semitism, when there's delegitimization, demonization, or a double standard, you know, held against the Jewish state. So we can talk about rhetoric and whether it does cross the line. And I say ultimately, it really doesn't matter what you call it, because we understand something, I think, whether this ideology is anti-Semitic or not, by its effect. And it is, and that's what our research has really shown, is that it is fundamentally anti-Semitic in effect. What do I mean?
How can you show that? How?
Well, we've shown it statistically. We've actually done 3 studies now looking at 120 schools with the largest Jewish student populations across the country. These are the finest schools in America, you know, including Harvard and Yale and Columbia and University of California and Berkeley and University of Michigan and University of Chicago. Every school that you can possibly think of that you would want your Jewish child to go is on this list, and of course more. And we looked at it, we actually collected and we have been collecting, and we monitor this, and people can actually go to our website, and we keep track of over 400 college and university campuses across the country. Every single anti-Semitic or broadly defined, including incidents that cross the line into anti-Semitism according to the State Department definition, including BDS, boycott, divestment, sanction activity, we include, although we divide it up so that we have actions that actually what we call target Jewish students for harm. And these kinds of actions include assault, harassment, intimidation, destruction of property, suppression of speech, actually tangible physical actions that clearly everybody would agree when they're directed at kids. This is anti-Semitism.
Just let me stop you for a second. Do you think that most Jews in America are thinking that they're going to send their kid to campus at these huge costs, and there's a chance that they might get physically assaulted or intimidated? Or, I mean, how much of the Jewish community do you think is educated as to the realities?
Well, I think more and more they're educated. I think that's why we started our organization. That's why we're doing our research, to show people what is going on college campuses. And, you know, to come back to this question about, you know, what the research shows about the effect of anti-Zionist rhetoric and the effect of BDS activity on college campuses, and how that effect is anti-Semitic, is that when you correlate the instances of BDS activity and also the presence of anti-Zionist groups like Students for Justice in Palestine, and also anti-Zionist faculty like faculty who have endorsed an academic boycott of Israel. We keep track of all that information on our website and in our databases. And when you actually look at statistically over hundreds of instances, we're talking about over 500 instances that we look at on over 100 college campuses, it's beyond a statistical shadow of a statistical doubt that there is an extremely strong association between anti-Zionist activity, including rhetoric, including anti-Zionist student groups and anti-Zionist faculty on campus, just even the existence of anti-Zionist faculty on campus, and anti-Jewish acts of anti-Jewish hostility.
So that means that if there are the more anti-Israel faculty, the more BDS activity, the more apartheid walls, the more films against Israel, the more speakers against Israel a campus has, the more likely it is, statistically,
3 to 8 times more likely it is.
It's 3 to 8 times more likely that there'll be actual harm done to Jewish students.
That's right. That's right. And if I had to say the single 2 best predictors, I mean, if you want to do a really sort of quick and dirty, how do I know if my kid's school is going to have risk of anti-Jewish hostility on it, I would say use our website and look up to see whether there is an active anti-Zionist student group like Students for Justice in Palestine.
What's your website?
AMCHA Initiative, AMCHA Initiative.org. And we have a whole web page that's devoted to every school that has an anti-Zionist student group, including Students for Justice in Palestine. Sometimes it has a different name. Jewish Voice for Peace is also an anti-Zionist Jewish student group. But the presence of 1 or more of those groups on a campus makes a school between 7 and 8 times more likely to actually have instances of anti-Jewish hostility. But what's even more important, I think, and even more interesting, because it's less intuitive than active Jewish anti-Zionist groups, is the presence of anti-Zionist faculty. That the presence of 1 or more faculty members that have endorsed the academic boycott of Israel makes a school about 6 to 7 times more likely to have instances. Now, it's a little bit less than an active student group, but the thing about active anti-Zionist student groups like SJP is that they come and go. They can be very strong,
right, but the faculty is there.
The faculty is there forever
and
because of the tenure
leading
system.
Indicator.
That I would say
anti-Zionist
anti-Zionist, and they're the ones who create the campus atmosphere, the campus
So if I'm
climate.
a parent and I'm looking for schools to send my kid, and I'm worried about what might happen, I want to look at your website, and I want to see where you have identified anti-Israel faculty.
And we've listed all of the faculty that have actually endorsed an academic boycott of Israel.
So we have a very short time, maybe 2 minutes. What's to be done? What should the Jewish community be doing? In 2 minutes.
In 2 minutes. Well, I think that the biggest issue for Jewish students at this point, what makes them uniquely vulnerable, is not just the fact that they're experiencing anti-Semitism, but that they are being discriminated against by the university administration in terms of the response to that anti-Semitism. Mm-hmm. They are being viewed, because of the current political correctness and political atmosphere on the campuses now, they are being viewed as white and privileged and therefore unworthy of the same kinds of rights that other protected minorities are receiving. And so what we believe is the way forward, and we're actually working on a plan to actually approach this way of thinking, is to actually try to urge university administrations to provide equal protections to everyone. Instead of dividing the world up into protected versus unprotected students, if each and every student is afforded the protection, the freedom of speech, the freedom to fully participate in campus life that every other student on that campus has and deserves, I believe that Jewish students will be safe.
Okay, so that actually is a paradigm shift.
It really is a paradigm shift.
Because from that before, we were only thinking to move the Jewish students into the protected class, because they're not, right? And you're saying there should be protections for all students, regardless of what particular group they're in.
That's exactly right.
And that would be better than...
And it really is, I think, at the heart of what America stands for, in a sense, and it certainly is at the heart of our Constitution. And I think we can actually really use that model and bring it into the arena of the kinds of bigotry that Jewish students are experiencing, the kinds of intolerant behavior, and we can use those freedoms that that are afforded by our Constitution, we can use those to actually protect Jewish students on campus.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Tammi Benjamin. May you go from strength to strength. Friends, I think the messages here, the takeaways are 2 or 3. First, the problem is endemic, it's national in scope, and it's very serious. Secondly, Jewish students cannot win by themselves and need intensified community support. And third, we all should, support those people like Tammi who are on the front lines of this battle. They deserve it, but more importantly, we need them to stay and fight and be able to expand their efforts. This is a battle that we, the Jewish community, can win, and one that we dare not lose. So thank you again, Tammi. You are an inspiration.
Thank you, Charles.
This is Charles Jacobs. I hope you will join me next time on Paradigm Shift.